All right, so what you're going to do in Illustrator is you're going to take your full page here, and we're going to be sectioning off parts of it so it'll fit into the Webtoon format. So the Webtoon format is going to be, as far as the size, is 800 pixels wide by 1280 pixels tall. So the first thing I'll do is in Illustrator, I'm going to create a new document, change it to those pixels of 800 wide and 1280 tall. Click create. And here is the size of the first artboard. So we're going to need a couple of these, and for my comic book, figured out that I average about 8 or 9 artboards. So we're going to come down here to this palette here, this little where it has artboard, and we're going to click and add a few more. So what I'll do is I'll add a new artboard, and I'll keep doing until I hit about 8 or 9, just like so. There we go, one more. Okay, so the first thing you'll see as I zoom out is that we have them set up horizontally. So since Webtoon is a vertically scrolling format, I'm going to change all these to so that they are going to be, stacked top to top, or top to bottom, or head to foot. So click this little icon down here, and it'll rearrange them into a vertical format. On your spacing, we're going to change this to 0, so that as they line up head to foot, there will be no gap in between. Click OK, and now you have those same 9 artboards arranged vertically. So the next step that I do is I take my artwork. You'll see here, along with the lettering, all my letters. I'm just going to copy them onto that new document. Right now, we'll just paste it anywhere, wherever it lands. That's okay, because we're going to be using that and eventually be using it over and over to build our page vertically for the Webtoons format. Here's my original page, and it's drawn in comic book format. So it's not at all designed to be natively in Webtoons, but that's okay, because I'm just going to reformat it, kind of crop it, zoom in on certain panels, reuse the same panel here and there as I see fit to create a flow that kind of fits the story, but then also fits within the Webtoons requirements of a vertical flowing story. So the first thing I'm going to take a look at is, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 comic book panels here. But for Webtoons, we're going to take and divide those. And I start by duplicating the original copy here. Zoom out a little bit. Just like that. If you're on a Mac, like I am, you hold Option Shift and drag, that would allow you to take a copy, make a copy of your original artwork, the page here that has all the colors on it. So as I take the first page, or the first panel I should say, into consideration, what I want to do is take a look at how I've written the story here. If you look at it, there's essentially one dialogue, or I should say one person speaking in the panel. There's 2 dialogue balloons here, but it's the same character. So for this one is actually, this panel is kind of formatted nice because it kind of has that portrait feel anyway. So I will take that panel, go to my copy. So here's that copied page. I'm going to drag it onto the first artboard here, and I'm going to crop it down. So we're going to take this square tool here, and if you familiarize yourself with how the keyboard shortcuts are in Illustrator, you'll know that For instance, if I press V, this will give me the arrow tool. If I press M, that will give me that square tool. And what I'll do is I will crop it. Just like that. Now what we're going to want to do is make sure that that box does not have a fill or a stroke. So I'm going to pull up the color palette, change the fill to fill of none, and the stroke to no stroke. And then what we're going to do is create a clipping mask. If we go Object, Clipping Mask, Make, you'll then see that that box that we created over the artwork has now clipped to the shape of the box that we just created over the comic book page. And so here I now have the very first panel that is related to the story that is going to show up on this artboard for the in the Webtoons format. So from here, we're going to go ahead and scale it, proportional scale. So I'm taking the arrow tool and just holding Shift as I drag one of these corners here. And what I like to do is just run it right straight to the edge, meaning the edge of the artboard, which on Webtoons is just going to be, there's going to be a white space if you're on a desktop on either side, but on mobile, it should pretty much run to the edge of your mobile device. So as you read this, it just appears to be, running off or kind of bleeding off into the edges of your phone. So the next part is I need to kind of play with the spacing of where I begin to add the text. Now, since I've done this before and I figured this out, what I usually do is I take one of the previous episodes that I've laid out for Webtoon, and I pull it up, and I'm going to grab the dialogue balloons from this page. I'm going to copy it and paste it onto the new page that we're working on. I need to do that, and I need to make a copy of this here, because we will be dragging this copy all over the, up and down, all down the artboards as we're working. So let's go ahead and lock the original artwork in place. In Illustrator, that's Command 2. So this allows me to grab the text, dialogue balloons, without having to worry about grabbing the artwork underneath it. So we'll move all of this here, and this is just the lettering along with the dialogue balloons. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it up so that it matches the font size that I have going here that we copied from the other episode that was already set up. So that way we have a font size that is readable on mobile devices, such as, iPhone or Android. So from here, we start playing around with the placement of how we want to create a flow. An important thing to do here is to take your artwork that you are working with, cropping and moving around and copying and duplicating, and put it on its own layer, and preferably on the bottom layer compared to the text. So on this layer, we're going to call this artwork, which is on the bottom. And you might as well move this copy here as well, which it is. So the main thing we just need to do is move the dialogue up into the top layer, and we'll just call that letters, as in lettering. So now you can see that the letters are on top. That makes it easier to handle overall, but then most importantly, the letters will be over the artwork, which is what we want, like 100 out of 100 times, right? So the next part is we're going to be actually now working with either rearranging parts of the dialogue balloons or even the pointer tails of those balloons so that it fits within the context of the layout that we're adjusting all the artwork to for Webtoons. The next part is a couple of aesthetic things here. You'll notice the thickness of this dialog balloon here. The line weight, if I click on it, is 3 points, so we're going to want to be consistent with that throughout. So since this dialog here, which was carried over from this page, got enlarged by scaling it up, the line weight maintained its thickness, so we need to bump that up to 3 so that it matches. So that looks good there. So the next part is, if you notice my dialog balloon here, because it was set up with the traditional comic book layout, this pointer balloon right here, or this balloon tail, is pointing to nobody. It needs to point to this character here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the arrow tool. Instead of using I think this is just the selection tool, we're going to change it to a white arrow. So that, I think that's the direct selection tool. So on my keyboard, you click A, or you can move over to your tool palette here and select it here, direct selection tool. So either way, you want to click the white. So I'm going to click right here, and this will grab it, hopefully. There we go. And what we can do, a little tricky to grab it, is I'm going to slide this over here. I'm going to rotate it, switch back to the selection tool, and I can easily just rotate by hovering near one of the corners of this little wedge-like shape, which is actually the balloon tail, and then go back to the direct selection tool and move it back. So now that balloon tail is pointing toward the character who is talking. Now we're going to grab this panel here. This is going to be a little bit more complex, because if you notice, there's some overlapping dialogue here by a third character that is unseen. In the story, it's a voice that this character here is hearing in her own mind, but yet she's also conversing with this character here. So my first step, and again, because this is for Webtoons and I'm translating on the fly, essentially converting it from like print format into Webtoons, I am going to take liberty as to how I spread this out so that it flows, but then also visually is appealing for Webtoons and is readable. So let's make a copy of this, and we're going to want to this time blow up this panel here. So if I click on the square tool here, or rectangle tool I should say, box tool, if you notice it's also M on the keyboard. You can easily toggle back and forth between different tools here in Illustrator, so click M on your keyboard, and then you'll get the tool that allows us to make that rectangle. Now, a quick tip here, if you want to not, make a box and it's always filled with black and white like that, black stroke, white fill, what you can do is take the color palette, and let's see if we can find that. Here it is, and preset it to 0 stroke and 0 fill. So we have the rectangle tool. Zoom in here a little bit. And let's go ahead and crop this panel. Now a keyboard shortcut to do a mask on this, or as it's called in Illustrator, clipping mask, is Command 7. So with both the box that we just drew, the rectangle, and the artwork, we'll hit Command 7, and then that makes a clipping mask. So what I can do now is take this panel and really blow it up. So we're just going to proportionally shift while holding shift button. I'm just going to scale this. And so in the original comic book, it's quite small, right? The original comic book page. But here it's going to be pretty dramatic because it's really taking up a good amount of artboard here. So that, I think that's good because it's going to add some visual contrast in the Webtoon format, which is it's always good to have visual formats, but contrast, but especially in the Webtoon format, I think. So there's a little bit of the inked panel here showing up. So in this case, I'm just going to copy both those, or select both those corners, and then just kind of tap it down here, the arrow keys, just to close up a little bit of that artwork. And then we have a nice giant panel here. A nice close-up on that character. So now we've got to go back to the story and then pick up the dialogue here. And so this is what this character is speaking right now. So we'll just grab that. Make sure all of these dialogue balloons are on the letters layer. There we go. So now the letter, there's all small and tiny. So what you have to do is you have to take this and then I scale it up. There we go. And then remember, we have to fix the dialogue balloon border, the stroke. We're using 3, a 3-point size, a 3-point weight on that. And the story here flows such that this character continues speaking from here. You can see there's the break in the sentence, and it continues here, and it's a nice close-up of this character. So that's essentially the process for how I'm breaking things down here. You can see what I've done so far. Here's the page, and I will continue to just build this page up here. So in the case of how I've laid out the original comic book page, this one with the overlapping texts and whatnot, I'll show you what I do next in this case. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these special dialogue balloons here. And when I say special, they're different than what we've done so far, right? Special, it has like a reddish border that just basically tells us that or just visually letting us know that there's another voice involved. So that's part of the story that's carrying on through my comic book. But again, I have it previously scaled up on I have it scaled up from a previous episode that I converted over to Webtoon. So I'm going to also copy that and paste it in the new page we're working on here. And I'm going to scale it up as well so that it matches. Again, don't forget to match the line weight on the bubbles here. So there we go. And we're going to get rid of these the previous lettering here, and we're just going to work with this one, with these two, as they are part of the story of this, as far as this page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these down to here, because what I'm trying to do is continue the flow of the story as it appears here. So now what I'm going to do is take this page here, a copy of it, and now we're going to be working with this third panel here, this one right here. So there's 2 ways to approach this. My my thought as I'm crafting this right here on the fly, as I'm actually, creating this, as I'm doing this tutorial, is not to show the entire panel, because there is dialogue. There's two instances where she's speaking, and what I want to do is tie in the dialogue from here, because remember, it overlaps in the original dialogue, in the original comic book page, in these two panels here, 2 and 3. So I'm going to craft something here on the fly. So I'm going to take this panel here, put the rectangle tool, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to zoom in on her face, just like that. And it looks like somehow we got a little bit of a fill and a stroke on that rectangle tool, which is no big deal, because what we can do is just tell it to have 0 fill, and it has 0 stroke. So then we'll create a clipping mask, and 7 on the Mac, and we now have a portion of that panel. But then that panel is going to come over here, and we're going to blow that up. Again, I stretch it to the ends of the artboards, and then I'm going to move in, or bring in the dialogue. I'm going to bring in this one here. And let's see, oops, what we got to do is make sure that we have to make sure that it's scaled. So let's go ahead and move it next to this balloon here, since I know I've scaled that. And then we'll just, again, shift and drag. And close enough. And just kind of eyeballing these. And that's truthfully how I'm doing it. It's close enough. It's fine. It'll work. And sometimes I find that I have to adjust the spacing depending on like how large I scale up the fonts, right? Because I just don't know until I start scaling and move things around how I have to adjust subsequently the panels that go in between. So in this case, I do like to have some overlap here. But then again, you notice that the dialogue, the little pointer arrow, the pointer, it's not pointing at the character. So we're going to use the direct selection tool. We call it the white arrow tool. Click on the pointer there. I'm going to click on V to switch that back to a selection tool and rotate it. And then go back to the direct selection tool. And then we're going to move this back where we have this pointing toward the character who is speaking here. And then if I want to rotate that, the R tool, for rotate, click R on the keyboard. And then if I want to move it back up, adjust it like so. And that looks okay right there, not bad. I don't really want the arrow, breaking into her forehead, although we do want the arrow, pointing toward her mouth in general to indicate that she's speaking. And I think just to make this just a little nicer, I'll widen up that arrow, I'll fatten up that end there as it attaches from the pointer to the actual dialogue balloon that has the lettering. And we have to make the lettering match on the stroke as far as the balloon's concerned. So we'll move that. And then maybe I'll just want to snug this up just a little more. And there we go. So again, just trying to getting a feel for this. And now that I've done this, it's just kind of bothering me. I kind of want to move this dialogue a little further. Actually, now I really want to move it to the far right. And as a result, I'm going to move the lettering with the red balloon and red text just a hair over to the left. Move this just a little bit to the left as well. And then now I've got to rearrange this pointer here. There we go. Now that's looking much nicer. because now it has a flow, right? We were reading left to right. It starts with the dialogue up here, moves down here. It is she who's speaking, and so the arrow is pointing toward her. Okay, so now that's a case where I've taken one panel and I've zoomed in on it. Now, I still want to show, we still need to have the storytelling, so even though I'm cropping panels, I make it a point to take and show as much of the original panel, because there's still a little bit of, still some story right here in terms of her speaking. So we're going to use this, and we're going to tie it into showing the full art. And of course, we need to make sure we scale up the text so that it's matching throughout the entire story, the entire layout here for Webtoon. And now that we have this page here, again, we did a crop in real tight to the character. Then I want to make sure I show as much of the original artwork and panel as possible. So we're going to also clip that in its entirety, or I should say create a clipping mask. Now I need to get rid of that stroke and remove that fill. And I'm going to create clipping mask around that. And then now we've got a little bit more pulled out on the shot, actually, as it was originally drawn. And then I'm going to scale that up. And again, because my artwork does not originate with me intentionally making the artwork for Webtoons. Again, I'm having to format my original artwork to fit within the Webtoons format, or style, within their scrolling vertical platform. Inevitably I'm going to end up with this shot here is clearly just a zoom in of that shot, and they're not different pieces of artwork, but it's it's what I've got going. It's what I'm going to do for converting this over to Webtoons. I'm not redrawing anything. I mean, the most modifications you'll see me make is just strictly to the dialogue balloons. Just reformatting them, moving the tails, the balloon tails, repointing them if I need to. And that's one of the advantages of working in Illustrator, which I realize if you're not working in Illustrator, I don't know how you would do it. I guess you would redraw them if you were in Photoshop, which is, that presents its own, I guess it would present its own challenges or its own method. But for Illustrator, for vector, this is like perfect, because it is vector art as far as the balloons are concerned. It's really easy to make these adjustments. So I'm just going to scale this up, the line weight on that balloon, and then we're going to adjust this arrow. Adjust it as you see fit. And we're going to take this and maybe get this just right up here. And then we'll move this right up to that. So that panel now coincides with the dialogue. And so what I would do is I would just continue to build this out. I think this gives you an idea of how I go about formatting the artwork as far as the way I've drawn it originally, which is in a standard print format, and breaking it down for a Webtoons format. Now, one thing I want to point out is these artboards that we set up. I've got 9 here. Yours could be less, yours could be more. But one thing you want to make sure you do is that when you set up these artboards, I'm circling back to this, is make sure when you set it up that you do not have a gap in between them, because that's critical. Now, just to show you one thing here, let me pull up some rulers here. You're going to notice that here's the very top of the artboard. And then here is the next artboard. You know, those guides are kind of hard to see. Maybe I can change that. Let's see, guides and grid. I'll change the guides to light red. That should make them easier to see. There we go. That's better. And then let's see, let's continue dragging these guides just so you can see. Now they're not going to output, so don't worry, but I just want to show you where the guides are actually placing them, or where they are, where the actual divisions are between the different artboards. That's what these red guides are going to be showing us. And I just want to point out that you'll notice the artwork gets cut up wherever. So like in this case right here, parts of her finger are on one artboard, and parts of her hand are on one artboard, and her pinky fingers on this artboard. Same thing here. This artboard right here, part of her head's on the one before it, part of it's on this one, you know, so on and so forth. This one, his artboard, this panel is actually split up on two artboards. It doesn't matter ultimately, so you don't need to worry about trying to fit perfectly within the artboard, because what we'll do in Illustrator is we'll export it out, and it will essentially cut it exactly where those red guides are, where I've placed them. But then when you upload it to Webtoon, it will all stitch together, and it will just end up, you know, matching exactly as how you've laid it out here. It'll be seamless, provided you don't have a border in between or a space in between each artboard. Now, when it comes to exporting the artwork out, I have found that the best way to do it is to do out of Illustrator, is do a file, export for screens. So we'll click on that, and we're going to want to export all the pages. And even though I haven't completed it here, I'm going to need to go back and ultimately finish this out. But for the sake of just doing this explainer video here, what we want to do is make sure that we just export all the boards out, and then, you know, pick where you want to place them. Since I'm kind of working temporarily here, showing you in this video, I'll just go through my process. So what I normally do is I create a folder within a subfolder within a main folder that is dedicated to this episode. I'll just name it for Webtoon. And then I choose that, and then I click. I don't really adjust anything here within this export for screens dialog box. I'm just going to click export artboard. And then here it is. Here's my main folder. This is chapter 54. And here's my subfolder within there, Webtoon. And then the export we just did with all those save for screens puts it in this folder called 1x. I don't know why it's called 1x, but it just is. And if you look at what's in here, I'll do a preview. There's our page. And if we scroll down, you can see how it's being chopped up. That's being chopped up in the exact proportion, it's the exact size that's needed per Webtoon's requirements, which is 800 by 1280 pixels. So it's 800 wide by 1280 pixels tall. So now, just to show you how this all works out, let me go ahead and launch Webtoons, and then we'll see how it gets uploaded. Okay, so we're here in my Webtoon dashboard for my own comic book series, the Realm Ethereal. And so I'm not going to publish this, but I'm going to show you the process by which, so you can see how these pages that we just created, how I just created in Illustrator, taking my original comic book format and then chopping it up and, you know, rearranging the dialogue balloons, and how it will eventually get uploaded after we've exported it out as JPEGs. So I'm going to click Add Episode, and I'm going to click Select File to upload. I'm going to browse for my folder where I output everything, and here it is. Now, I didn't do everything. I didn't do the entire episode as far as my own page is concerned, so let's just go ahead and upload the pages I did do just for this explainer video. So now the pages are uploaded into the back end or the dashboard of my my own comic book series on Webtoon. And I've uploaded just what I worked on. And then what I'll do is I'll click on, let's just do Preview PC. So Webtoons will give you a preview, a little dialog box, and then you can see a window, I should say, that shows you how everything is just fitting. We can preview mobile. That will give you a smaller window. And the browser I'm using is Chrome, but you can see here that when it's scaled down to about the size of a, of a smartphone, Android or iPhone, you can see how it all flows. And that is, again, was all set up here in Illustrator. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish this out, get the rest of this page broken down and cropped and rearranged, and then I will get it uploaded to Webtoon. Hope you found this interesting. Hope you found this helpful. And if you got any questions, just ask or leave a comment or ask a question in the comments. Thanks for watching.